as it relates to, I'm going to do a little bit of shift because this has to do with COVID. And I want to spend a few minutes with you guys tonight talking about what is a very important thing for investors, and that is what's going to happen over the course of the next 30 days to 12 months with respect to my tenants, and what should I be doing now to minimize my risk and maximize my return to ensure that I don't have a high rate of default. Now, most of you have watched the news. Most of you have seen Governor Pritzker's speeches. Most of you are on Facebook and see some of the calls to action regarding the knee-jerk reaction from the political machine in Chicago, from the political machine in Springfield, and primarily this comes from progressives. So highly progressive people. These are the people like AOC, Bernie Sanders. Got a lot of those folks in Illinois, and they have proposed rent moratoriums. They have proposed longer periods of time for you to serve notice. They have proposed provisions where you're not able to evict tenants. So as an example, there's a piece of legislation pending in Springfield right now, which would require all the way up to 90 days notice before you can actually file an eviction case. For those of you who have filed an eviction case or had the displeasure or been required to file an eviction case, you know, for non-payment of rent, it's typically a 5-day notice. That 5-day notice has to have very specific language in it. It has to say that you're required to pay the full amount within 5 days. If you fail to pay that full amount within 5 days, your right to occupy the premises are terminated. Now what's happening in Springfield and the city of Chicago is they're trying to give tenants much longer periods of time and prevent landlords from getting their properties, because what they've done is they have lumped all landlords together. And what they've said is, oh, if you own real estate, you must be a large hedge fund. You must be a private equity group. You must be somebody who preys upon the weak, the poor. And quite obviously, that's not the case. All of us who are on this webinar this evening, and most people who own real estate, are just regular people who have regular jobs, who are trying to create passive income to create a life worth living, a legacy worth leaving, a career worth having, and a business worth owning. Yet, because of creating a constituency that relies upon dependency, they want to pass this legislation because that's very, very sexy for the particular constituents that they want. In other words, that sort of action mobilizes people for votes. So you know, that's all well and good. You know, you can sit here and listen to Gary Davidson on his soapbox and say, yes, that's right, we're victims of a demonic political culture in the state of Illinois. But what action plan should you take to minimize your risk and maximize your return? What are some of the things that are, let's say, myths? What are common myths associated with this legislation? Some of the common myths are that the governor actually placed a hold on filing evictions. All right. I'm going to break this down for everybody because we have probably people who are listening who are new investors and some who are experienced. So for those of you who are experienced, I apologize. I'll probably be speaking beneath you. But when you have to file an eviction case, it starts first with a 5-day notice. That has to be served personally or by someone above the age of 13 that resides on the premises. Next, after that 5 days expire and they have not paid the rent, you have the right to file what we all know as an eviction case. It's a lawsuit in court saying you want possession of that property. Now, many landlords believe that because the governor enacted a moratorium on evictions, that you have the handcuffs on, that you can't file an eviction case. And that can't be further from the truth. In actuality, for you to have the edge over other people, if you find yourself in that unfortunate situation where you're required to file an eviction, you need to act even quicker now than you have in the past. Why? Because the line for the evictions are getting very long. While the sheriff is not physically evicting people from properties, you can still file your case. Now, what happens when the court systems reopen? The judges, many of whom are friends of mine, are going to take those cases in the order in which they are filed. So, like when you go to Disney and you stay on site and you get the 1 hour early pass to get in before all the great unwashed and the people who are not staying on the Disney site, we need to get to the courthouse early so that our cases are heard as soon as possible. Because if you wait until after the governor pulls back the eviction moratorium, then you could be waiting 4, 5, 6 months before you're actually going to be able to place that order with the sheriff. And what do we know about evictions? We're able to always slow down the process, but we can never speed up the process. In other words, we can always dismiss the case. If the tenant gets caught up, we can work out whatever plans we have with them. If they end up starting to pay, we can always slow down that eviction process. But if the tenant doesn't do what they say, if things don't go as you have planned, you're never going to speed that up and you're going to be at the back of the line, okay? So very, very important for those people. We have an eviction attorney on staff, Castle Law. The firm is set up kind of like a doctor's office. I own the firm. We have about 14 or 15 attorneys. If you need an LLC, you go to this attorney. If you need a real estate closing, you come to me. If you need an eviction, you go here. So attorneys that specialize in this, that's all they do every day. They're in court doing these things every day. So for those of us who are involved in owning rental properties or want to own rental properties, the key to this exercise is we need to treat ownership of rental properties like a business, because it is a business. And so we need to have specific steps in place. This is a very unemotional exercise. If a person doesn't pay by the 1st, you go to step 1. If the person doesn't pay by the 5th, you serve them with a 5-day notice. If after 5 days, you file the eviction. If you start using your own emotions or your own subjective beliefs or what the tenant tells you, and you start making decisions based on what you think, you're not going to have a successful business. In order to have a successful business, we have to control our variables, we have to minimize our risk, and we have to maximize our return. Hugo, I'm bloviated here for about 15 minutes. I don't know, because I came on late, and I don't know how many people we have. I know this is going to be rebroadcast. Are there any specific questions or questions coming in right now? Or Hugo, do you have anything off the top of your head that you'd like me to speak about?
There is one question. It says, does the legislation only apply to Chicago or all of Cook County?
Oh, okay. I've got some Zoom group chats here. I just pulled it up.
Oh, exactly. There's another one.
So,
what did you mention about the 90-day notice?
We have a question from Beata. Is the notice via email? No, the notice cannot be via email. The notice has to have specific statutory language under the Illinois eviction statute. and it must be served either personally or via either personally or by someone above the age of 13 that resides on the premises. Now, Naima asked, does the legislation only apply to Chicago or all of Cook County? There are specific ordinances that are being debated in the city of Chicago, and those ordinances will apply to the city of Chicago. There's also a variety of legislation that is pending in Springfield, and that would apply to the entire.
I believe we might have lost Gary. Oh, okay, Gary. Yeah, you are back online.
Where, because I've been talking for about 10 minutes, probably not realizing that I'm not online.
Oh, just for the
where
last
was I when
30
I left
seconds.
off?
When you were answering the question about the legislation applying not to all Cook County.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So what I mentioned about the, I think Beata had asked about the 90-day notice and how that needed to be served.
Right.
And what I mentioned is that that notice has to be specific language. If you need that notice, that 5-day notice, reach out to me at gdavidson@castlelaw.com. You can't just say your rent's late, you need to pay by 5 days. It has to be exact, specific verbiage, word for word. That notice can only be served in one of 3 ways. Personally, meaning I give it to the tenant. Abode service, that's someone that resides on the premises above the age of 13. Or the third way is certified mail return receipt requested. We do not suggest serving eviction notices via certified mail. Why? Because the only time that the eviction notice will be valid is if you have the signed green card. And guess what? I know you're going to find this hard to believe. Fasten your seatbelts. Tenants don't sign for certified mail. I know you probably cannot believe it. They don't sign for certified mail. I'm going to open this chat, Hugo.
Sure.
Because there were a few other questions that I saw that I wanted to answer, but I'm not seeing the group chat right now. Hugo, do you have the group chat where you can tell me some of the questions that were asked?
Okay, there's another question. So you answer one. What did you mention about the 90-day notice by Natalie? And then
I think there was a question, Hugo, regarding does it only apply to Chicago or does it apply for Cook County, correct?
Exactly.
Okay, I remember seeing that one. So guys, Illinois has more governmental entities than any other state in the United States, down to mosquito abatement districts. So the city of Chicago has ordinances. There's currently ordinances that are being proposed regarding rent moratoriums and 90-day notices, but there's also legislation pending in Springfield. So that would be in the Illinois House of Representatives and the Illinois Senate, and then passed by Governor Pritzker. So the Chicago ordinance would apply only to the city of Chicago, and then the state of Illinois law would apply to the state of Illinois. Now, nothing has been passed yet. That is the good news. The Illinois Realtors Association, groups like Chicago RIA, ChicagoDealVault, and other interest groups are actively calling on their representatives to defeat this legislation. This is, well, since I'm the guest, I can say this. I'm going to get into politics just a wee bit. This is a political statement, but it's just a statement of fact and statement of truth. Unfortunately or fortunately, regardless of what side of the political spectrum you fall on, there is not a single Republican state legislator who is supporting these rental restrictions and the ability to evict tenants. This is all being proposed by progressive Democrats. Unfortunately, the city of Chicago and Springfield are all run by progressive Democrats. So there's a very, very, very strong likelihood that some form of this legislation is going to pass. Again, not a political statement. It is what it is. That's the case. The chances for that being defeated in its entirety is going to be a little bit of a long shot. What we're going to have to really rally around is more moderate Democrats to come on board with the Republican politicians to create a coalition to stop this progressive plan to basically allow people to live in your properties for free into perpetuity, and really just completely destroy the economy in the state of Illinois. What other questions do we have?
One more from Ralph. Can you make payment arrangements with tenants, and would that avoid the initial 5-day notice?
Great question, Ralph. Fantastic question. And that answer to that question is very likely that will void the 5-day notice. Now, if you're familiar with the Illinois eviction statute and the 5-day notice, it says something almost identical to the following. I have this memorized. Only full payment of the amount demanded in this notice will invalidate the landlord's right to terminate your tenancy. So if we read the plain language of the Illinois eviction statute mandated 5-day notice, it says only full payment will invalidate. However, there's a number of appellate court cases that exist that basically say that you have reinstated the lease or amended the lease terms and created a new tenancy if you have an agreement to pay certain sums in exchange for not proceeding with the eviction. So in the event that you actually have a written plan or agreement in place, or the tenant could go in front of the judge and say, hey, my rent was $1,000, but he said if I paid $500 a month, and that's what we call, I can't remember the type of evidence. It's been so long since I've been to court. But it's a specific type of evidence that would suggest that there is a agreement, then that would invalidate your 5-day notice, and you would have to start all over again. Similarly, if you send additional emails or notices, that could start the clock ticking again. So it's very, very important, even though it's simple, to use an eviction attorney to handle this, to minimize your risk and maximize your return. The other thing is, I can tell you this with a high level of certainty. We file thousands of evictions a year for a lot of landlords all over, from Lake County all the way to Kankakee County, out to Kane County. And do not, I'm telling you, there's places to save money and places not to. I used to own about 40 rental properties. I sold them all. I'm now into commercial real estate, but I always had a private process server, which is usually an off-duty police officer with a gun. I would pay them $50 or $75 and they go out and serve that 5-day notice. Why? You're like, well, I can serve the 5-day notice myself and save the $50 or $75. For those of you who have children, except for Hugo's little beautiful baby. She's too young to realize what this is going on. But for those of you who have children, what happens when you tell them to do something? You have a, what, 50%, 40%? My kids are 14 and 16. I'm down to like a 10% chance that they're going to listen to me and do what I ask them to do. Okay? Because it's just noise. They don't find it to be serious. But if you use a third-party process server, a guy with a gun, an off-duty police officer that raps on the door and says, "You're served," that means that you've taken the next step and you've actually invested in someone else. So just like if another adult yells at your children, that's going to tend to get their attention more than if you yell at your children because you're yelling at them every day to clean up their room or do whatever. That's the same thing when it comes to evictions. Our tenants are just like our children. They're not going to do something unless they're scared or forced to do it. Periodically, they're good. I shouldn't be so harsh on my children, but the idea behind this is that we want to use that third-party process server. And if you need people, I can recommend several off-duty police officers. They do it as a side job. They'll charge you $50, $75 for serving these notices. All sorts of little different tricks too. The more information you can give that process server to serve that notice, the better. Where do they work? What time do they go to work? You know, tenants aren't just going to open the door and say, "Come on in, would you like a cup of coffee?" They're going to try to avoid service. So you have to be as crafty as the tenant. Here's the beautiful thing, guys. Guess what's happening right now? I don't know about any of your wives or husbands, but the Amazon truck comes to my house 4 times a day. The UPS driver comes 4 times a day. You know what? If you have to, go ahead, go to the door, ring the doorbell, have a tell your process server to have a brown paper bag, put it on the ground, and go walk to your car, stand outside. As soon as they come out to grab the paper bag, you can run up and say, "Congratulations, here's your 5-day notice." Pretend to be the Domino's pizza delivery man. Whatever it takes, we need to get our rent money. So get that process started right away. Don't wait, because otherwise you're going to be at the back of the line. What other questions might we have?
Another question from Max is, does the 5-day notice and eviction process apply to commercial tenant, or is the process different?
100% the same, Max. A 5-day notice. And again, let's just go through the notices real quick. 5-day notice for non-payment of rent. So all other violations of the lease would be a 10-day notice. So if it's a non-monetary default, people are smoking weed, they're playing loud music, they're not cutting the grass, you know, they're acting like general vagrants, they're violating some other term of the lease aside from non-payment of rent, that's going to be a 10-day notice. For non-payment of rent, it's going to be a 5-day notice. Now, let's put an asterisk on that for a second. The biggest mistake that I see investors make is everybody calls me and they say, "Do you have a form?" You know, they go online and they get a form lease. I can't tell you the number of times I get leases from people and they're absolute and total garbage. They have mutual and reciprocal attorney fee provisions. Why would you ever have a provision in your lease where the tenant could recover attorney fees from you if you breach? I see leases all the time that provide for 7-day notices. I see leases all the time that say that they have 5 days to make their rent payment and then they're considered late after 5 days. Why? That's the most insane thing in the world. Why would you give someone a grace period? If it's due on the first, it's due on the first. If they don't start to accrue penalties and interest until the 5th day, you might as well make the rent due on the 5th. Who's going to pay in advance? So it's amazing to me that, you know, we all have a finite amount of money. And many of us are investing in real estate, and we have our children's college education on the line with our rental properties. We have our dream life of retiring and having that as our residual income. We've invested so much into these properties, and yet we've left the backside completely wide open. You've left the door open with all of this air going out in the summer when the air conditioning is running at full blast, using documents that, you know, you pulled off the internet and that don't have provisions that say, you know, if you're late on the 1st, on the 2nd, it's a daily accruing penalty. I see leases all the time that say, if you don't pay by the 5th, it's a $50, $25, $75 late charge. Well, we need to use some common sense here, guys. If I can't pay by the 5th and I get a $75 late charge, why the hell do I care whether I pay on the 10th, the 15th, or the 20th? Because once I'm late, it's $75. Why not make that a daily accruing $5 penalty? So if you're late on the 1st, on the 2nd, it's a $75 late charge. And then every day thereafter, it's a $5 fee each day. Because what do we want to do? We want to incentivize these people to pay. I told my tenants, my goal and my dream is they never pay me a late fee ever. If they paid me on the 1st and I never got an extra $5, then I was a happy camper. But on the same token, if they paid me on the 2nd, I wanted my $5. I was going to get my $5, and I made sure that they knew that I expected my $5. Because again, these tenants are like your kids, and you have to calibrate their expectations and set expectations for them. And if you give them an inch, they'll take a mile. So treat this like a business. Your expectation is the 1st. If you allow the tenant to pay on the 5th, just know that next month they're going to pay on the 7th. And then the following month they're going to pay on the 10th. And the following month they're going to pay on the 15th. That is on you. That's your responsibility. You have to look in the mirror because you created that. So be very, very strident, be very, very strict, be humble, be generous, act with humility, be kind, but understand that you're running a business and you cannot personalize this, and it has to be a very, very strict policy. No problem, Max. So we do have leases. We have leases for commercial. We have leases for residential. The other thing I would recommend is a very, very, very strong credit application. There's 2 components to filing an eviction case. One is to minimize risk. You're going to hear me use this term all the time. Minimize risk, maximize return. Minimizing risk is getting the property back from the non-paying tenant and then getting that property back leased to a tenant that will pay. So that's minimizing your risk. Maximizing return, there's actually 2 counts to an eviction complaint. One is for possession and the other is for money. So you're actually suing them for money. Now, I tell most landlords that when we get to the point where we're filing an eviction, don't push a rock up a hill. Don't chase your money. The idea is we got to get the property back and move on. Don't worry about collecting the $600. It's probably gone. You're never going to find the person, etc. However, if you get a great lease application with all of their bank account numbers at the beginning of your lease, everybody likes each other. They're going to be very, very willing to offer up all their bank account numbers, where they bank, where they work, collect all of that information, because it makes it very easy for a lawyer then to garnish their wages and freeze their bank accounts. Collecting a judgment, we do with what's called the third-party citation to discover assets. If you bank at Harris Bank, after we get a judgment for $1,000, we send a notice to Harris Bank saying we have a judgment for $1,000, and your bank immediately freezes your account on the day that they receive the citation. So in the rental application, asking them what days they get paid. Do they get paid monthly? Do they get paid weekly? Because we pay attention to that when we go to collect money for people, and we'll serve those citations at a very specific time. If we know that person gets paid on the 30th of the month, we're going to have that citation to the bank on the 31st when they have the most amount of money there. I'm going to give you guys a fun little story. Back when I was a trial lawyer, when I first graduated, and the first firm I was at, I was a trial lawyer, kind of like Jim Carrey from what was it, Liar Liar, the movie. I was a little bit corny in court, but here's a fun little trick, and you got to get with attorneys that have street smarts. So we had actually got a judgment against a carriage company in Chicago. You know those little carriages, you go down to Chicago and, you know, there's a beautiful little carriage and it's got lights on it, and you take your wife out for your anniversary and you go on a carriage ride around Chicago on Michigan Avenue. I hope my wife's not listening. She's probably going to ask me, you know, where's my carriage ride? But we had received a judgment against one of these carriage companies for like $75,000. And I think it probably had to do with the horse knocked the person off the carriage and they sprained their ankle or something, one of the personal injury lawyers. And we had lawyers from Dartmouth at my firm. We had lawyers from the University of Chicago. I went to Northern Illinois University, called it Harvard on the Highway. And these guys could not collect this judgment. And I said, guys, I'm going to collect this judgment within a week. I'll bet you a large pizza I can collect this judgment in a week. The guy from Dartmouth is like, you're not going to collect this judgment. I've done everything in the book. So I called the carriage company. I said, hey, this is, John Smith. And I just got married and I don't have a credit card. And I'd really like to buy my wife a carriage ride for our 1 year anniversary coming up. But I don't have a credit card to pay you for the gift certificate for this carriage ride. I said, would you mind if I sent you a check? Guy's like, well, we normally don't accept checks. I'm like, yeah, I know, but I'm just married. I don't have any credit cards. Would you mind if I sent you a check? And he's like, okay, no problem. So I wrote him a check for $125. Within 4 days, we found out that he banked at First Security, because where did he cash the check? He went to his bank. And guess what's on the back of the check? Exactly where he banked. We served the third-party citation, and I think we got about $23,000 for our client. Not the whole judgment, but that carriage company was not happy because we cleaned their account out. Here's the beautiful thing. I gave this $125 gift certificate that came in the mail to my law partner who graduated from Dartmouth, and I said, here, go take your wife for a carriage ride. So we not only did we collect the $23,000, but we got our $125 back because they sent us our gift certificate. Point is, guys, you got to be a little bit crafty. These tenants are crafty. You got to use the same sort of techniques. You can do things ethically. You can do things legally, and that's the only way to operate a business. But you can also do things in a way that is unconventional to make sure that you minimize your risk and maximize your return. Natalie, you want to provide a contact email address for the forms. If you want to send an email to gdavidson, GDAVIDSON at castlelaw.com, gdavidson@castlelaw.com. Also, if you go to ChicagoDealVault and you go to the preferred vendor tab.
Yeah, I'm right here.
Yep.
Then,
so Hugo, go ahead and go through that with them.
Perfect. So on the preferred partners, you go to attorney, right here, attorney, and then Castle Law, Gary's contact information is right there. His full name, his email, his phone number. So that's how you can get a hold of him.
Okay. Now, I would be remiss, it's 7:21, so, but I want to just, for those of you who are Hugo, are people listening or people who are going to get this broadcast to, will everybody be a DealVault member or not necessarily?
I would say not necessarily, but most are. So.
Okay. Well, for those of you who aren't, okay, obviously Hugo had me on here, so I'm going to shamelessly self-promote him. But I want to tell you, this is the God's honest truth. I represent many of the largest hedge funds in Illinois, many of the largest private equity groups, most of the sophisticated investors. Last year, I was rated #1 in Illinois for representing real estate investors on real estate transactions, so by volume closed. And in the top 3 in the state of Illinois overall, only behind Cadillus. Cadillus beat me out. Cadillus is the large REO firm. But beyond that, nobody closed more transactions than Castle Law. I represent hedge funds that have guys from MIT that are underwriting deals, that are sourcing properties. And I have not seen a more powerful tool for searching and providing off-market opportunities than ChicagoDealVault, especially for the price. Because a lot of my hedge fund operators are hiring guys out of MIT that are doing exactly the same thing that DealVault is doing, except for they're paying these guys $300,000 and $400,000 a year. So massively great product. Work with it. It's got a lot of bells and whistles. I almost kind of equate it to a Microsoft Excel or Word product, in that people use Microsoft Word or Excel for 10, 15, 20 years, but they only actually use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6% of its actual capacity. So dive deep into this, because it's got a lot of stuff there. So even for those of you who've been on it a while, I mean, work this, because you're probably only even using 5, 6% of it. So Hugo, I don't know if you want to end it. If there's other questions, I'm happy to answer them. Just the last thing before I turn it over to you, Hugo, Natalie has one more question. Tenant who owes a past due balance had moved out. Am I able to pursue the past money owed? Yes, it's a small claims case. In those situations, if you send me an email, I'll refer you to a collections attorney. We really don't file small claims cases for people just because it's cost prohibitive. There's basically 2 analyses. Number one, determining that the person owes you money and how much money they owe, that's not the issue. So liability is always pretty straightforward. Really, you have to start backwards, and it's collectability. So collectability. If you think that you can collect the money, or you have a reasonable chance of collecting the money, then it's worthwhile. If you don't, you kind of have to chalk these things up as business losses. Restaurants have so much spoiled food. Grocery stores have so many grapes that spoil. I have clients that don't pay me, and we end up writing off the balances and firing the clients. We just don't represent them anymore. So same thing with you. Sometimes you have to make business decisions. Even filing a small claims case is going to cost you $400 just in costs, just because of the filing fees and the service fees. And if you don't think that you're going to be able to collect it, if the person's a cash payer and they don't have a W-2 job and they're probably hiding their money under the mattress, no sense in trying to collect that money from them. All your Section 8 tenants, obviously, that's going to be prove a little bit difficult in trying to collect money. If the reason they're on Section 8 is because they need assistance from our government to help pay their rent, and that's great. We need to provide housing to people, but those aren't the sorts of people that you're going to have the ability to collect. Finally, okay, so if he works for the Chicago Police Department, that's a horse of a different color. You can that's a whole nother decision on whether you want to file a small claims case against you, but that's up to you. Management companies usually will refer attorneys, so we actually have business relationships with a number of different management companies. Management companies oftentimes will help you serve the 5-day notice, but then when it comes to the court process, you have to hire a lawyer. Just the last thing, and then I'll shut up. You can file an eviction on your own. I don't recommend it, and I don't think it's wise to do it. The whole court system is designed to keep people who are non-lawyers out. We don't treat non-lawyers very well. We try to punish you for doing it yourself because we try to protect our union. But you can file one yourself. And people do it successfully all the time. It's just a matter of time value of money, or time value of your time versus money. Because when I have an attorney going down to court, we're there for 10 cases and they're there. You have to take a whole day off of work, and it's a whole process. But if you have an LLC or a corporation or any entity, you'll have to hire a lawyer. So because in order to represent a entity by law, you have to be licensed. So therefore, a person is able to represent themselves if you own the property as Gary Davidson. But if the property is owned by Castle Law, then the judges will not allow you to proceed what we call pro se. Pro se means, it's Latin for by yourself. So Hugo, thanks so much for having me tonight. It's always a pleasure. I'm always glad to fill in when your other person can't make it. I hope I provided everyone with some value. Again, if anybody needs to reach me, you can email me at gdavidson@castlelaw.com. Because I have a lot of staff and a lot of attorneys, I tend to be a little bit more available rather than less available, because I'm focused on my clients growing and scaling their business, and the minutia of doing the actual closing and responding to attorney review letters are done by other things. So I'm here to help give you a hand up on your business and help you grow and scale.
Thank you very much, Gary. We're so privileged to have the #1 attorney in Illinois with us tonight. So we greatly appreciate it, Gary. And then just a last tip of advice for our members coming from you. What is it that you recommend our members should do right now? What should they engage in during this downtime crisis?
Right now, there's a lot of opportunities for purchasing real estate. I'm actually bullish on real estate right now. Inventory is pretty low, so pricing is still pretty competitive and tight. So you have to, use products like ChicagoDealVault to find opportunities. You can't, it's not like, 2005 and 2006 where you could hit a pitching wedge and catch a good property on the MLS. You have to have a little bit more ingenuity. But I like to describe it, and I did this a few weeks ago. So for those of you who were on the webinar, I apologize for using the same analogy, but I like to analogize the current environment like fishing around a pond. And would you rather fish around a pond that has a fisherman every foot casting their line, putting all that pressure on the pond? Or are you better off going to that pond when no one's there, where there's an abundance of fish that need to eat? And right now, due to COVID, here's what I can tell you. The experts are still buying. The novices have stopped. So the onesie-twosie people are scared. They're not buying. The hedge fund operators, the private equity groups, the guys who, have the most money, they're still actively looking and buying properties because they see it as opportunity. It's just like what Warren Buffett says. You buy down and you sell high. And right now, there's just not as many people fishing around that pond because everybody is waiting. Every single newer investor and person who maybe just joined Mastery, which is Andrew's group, they're like, well, I'm waiting. What are you waiting for? Are you waiting for? Well, I'm waiting for everybody else to start buying. Okay, think about that for a second. Does that really make sense? You're waiting for everybody else to buy? I mean, if you look around and no one else is buying, before you were bitching because you're like, there's too much competition. Everybody's buying. When I show up at the wholesale, there's 50 people there waiting. I don't want to buy now because there's too many people buying. And now there's nobody buying and you're like, well, I'm not buying now because there's nobody buying. So unchain your mind and unchain the shackles that you're putting on yourself. If you use products like DealVault, if you are smart, if you use ingenuity, there's always opportunity. And if you look around, there's not as many people buying. So that creates a massive, massive opportunity to get an edge on your real estate investing career.
Great, awesome advice. So thank you very much, Gary, for your words of wisdom. They were so powerful. And I love that analogy of the pond, by the way. So thank you for taking time out of your busy life to join us tonight.
Thanks so much, Hugo. Thanks for having me. Any questions, feel free to call, guys.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Gary. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, guys, so it was incredible, as always, listening to Gary. So friends, quick reminder, please, tomorrow we have a virtual live tour, so please make sure that you join us tomorrow at 6:30 p.m., right? So we're going to take you through a 3D live virtual property tour in Wooddale. So it's going to be a deal, no deal analysis. Please, this is the last event before our boot camp. Okay, so please make sure that you RSVP for the boot camp. We're going to have over 160 people. So it's going to be a huge event. Make sure that you RSVP for this event. And also, I want to make sure that if you don't have access to DealVault, you can get it tonight. Okay, so to get DealVault for free for the next 30 days, all you need to do is fill this form out, free DealVault for the next 30 days. So all you need to do is fill that out for the package, select special Chicago DealVault. And then for the promo code, it's Castle Law. Castle Law, one word, uppercase or lowercase. you are going to get DealVault for free, unlimited training. And then there's a question, Natalie, I previously registered for the bootcamp, but I don't have the meeting ID. Okay, we're gonna send a text message, we're gonna send an email. We're gonna make sure that you join the bootcamp, okay? Because we're gonna give it all. We've never run an event like this. This is the first time, so I'm super, super excited to give you tons and tons of value. So friends, in fact, these are, let me show you, this is just the handouts that we're gonna be giving out. On Fix and Flip, we're gonna be giving scripts, we're gonna be giving you fundamentals, lenders, entity documents. Wholesaling, we're gonna give you a lot of information, including contracts. So we're getting most or all our contracts from Gary, so everything that he talked about, on leases, contracts, we have them all, okay? So we're gonna give you a lot of handouts, information at the bootcamp, so please make sure that you RSVP. This is the link via Meetup to RSVP to the bootcamp. Get DealVault for free. If you don't have access yet, we can still train you before the bootcamp because we're gonna get the most out of the bootcamp once you have access to the system, because we're gonna be referring back and forth on certain pieces of the system. So please make sure that you do get access. Not only that, but I want to make sure that you get trained ASAP. Also, please download our DealVault app. It's got over 100 training videos in a sequential manner. To do that, send a text message to 818-818 and the keyword DealVault. It's going to send you a reply with the link to the Apple Store or the Google Play Store for you to download DealVault app, okay? So it's just primarily over 100 training videos in a sequential manner. So everything that we present, it gets recorded. So you're gonna get the replay for today's event tomorrow. So I'm gonna stay on the line for the next few minutes to answer any questions. Thank you everyone for joining. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow, 6:30, a virtual property tour, deal, no deal. We're gonna analyze that, and then please RSVP for the bootcamp. It's gonna be a huge event, very, very powerful. We're gonna have key players joining us, so please make sure that you RSVP. That's what we're gonna be covering at the bootcamp. So right here, you can watch the video, the intro video, and RSVP right here to get your spot. So thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Mark. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow and Sunday. So I'm gonna stay on the line for the next few minutes to help you answer any questions, sign up, and remember, get it for free, DealVault, for the next 30 days. Promo code is CASOLAW. Package, please select special Chicago DealVault. So it's that simple to get it. So right here, the promo code is CASOLAW. Could be uppercase, lowercase, special Chicago DealVault for the package, and that's it. After that, we're gonna lock you in at the promotional rate of 140. Retail is 190. We're gonna lock you in at the 140. But get it for free for 30 days, unlimited training. We just wanna make sure that you have all the tools, training, technology, leads, everything available. I wanna make sure there's nothing on the way for your success today, okay? So please get it. Now RSVP for our next upcoming events, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow and Sunday. So thank you everyone for joining tonight, and have a wonderful evening. I'm gonna stay on the line for the next few minutes.